Say something, please. Testing, testing. One, two,
Hello,
three.
hello.
Yeah, we should be good. Hey, everyone. Sorry about this. This is entirely my fault. And again, I'm late, but I'm here with reasoned answers. We're going to be discussing the life of Muhammad. Does Islam make one a better person? Is everyone hearing me? Drop a one in the comments, please. Yep. So, Thaddeus, are you seeing us live? Yes, we are live. Things are good, apparently. So, my
Yep,
deepest
I
apologies.
see the screen. I obviously don't have the audio on, so I can't confirm that, but I see that the YouTube screen is up.
Yeah, I need to fix my camera. So, guys, yeah, it's, me, typical. Yeah, it's not Thaddeus' fault. I promise you that. It is entirely my fault. Okay, let's begin. Let's begin. Thank you. So, thanks, Thaddeus, for joining us. It's been a while.
hmm
But yeah, so what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're going to be looking at the biography of Muhammad. We might get to see some of the wild, crazy things in his biography, but our main focus is to answer this question: does Islam make someone a better person? When someone converts to Christianity, often they have a complete life-changing experience. A drug addict is suddenly set free from his addiction. A person who has attempted to murder someone suddenly is a great member of society. These kinds of things. When someone converts to Islam, well, you might have something like that. You might have someone who seems to be living a better life. You also might have someone who converts to Islam and wants to wage jihad. And by which I don't mean this private personal struggle, I mean wage offensive war, because they are taking the Islamic texts seriously, and that seems to be what they are getting out of them.
Yeah, I shouldn't
And
laugh, but sadly, I mean Nikolai Sennels, there's the psychologist, the Danish psychologist who's done extensive work on this, but he has stated that studying Islam, especially youths who grew up in Islam, it creates incredible mental pressure on them and actually makes them violent.
Yep. But you never know. Any individual, you could say, well, that's just something wrong with that individual. Maybe they misinterpreted Islam. So we're going to look at Muhammad and see if Islam made Muhammad into a better person. Taking the Islamic texts for granted. We'll be a little bit critical of them historically speaking, but for the most part, say, even according to Islam's own sources, even if Islam's sources are true, and if Islam's true, their sources have to be true, right? So even if their own sources are true, does Muhammad seem to be better before he starts to receive revelation or after he starts to receive revelation? Muhammad, of course, knows Islam better than anyone else. So if he is becoming a worse person based on what he's receiving from his so-called God, then we have to ask, is he really receiving revelations from God, or is he receiving revelations from another source that seems to hasten to fulfill his desires, perhaps?
The answer is B. So yeah,
All right,
sadly, yeah,
stream over.
yeah. So yeah, that looks interesting. Is there anything else you want to add to, you want to mention on any news or updates you want to pass on before we dive in here?
Well, lots has been happening on my channel. I know Lloyd's been very busy, with his new job and whatnot. Very happy to connect with Lloyd again. I've seen some of his material on Sam's show. Great material. Been growing the channel quickly, so praise God for that. My own channel's been growing quickly, connecting with lots of Muslims, having lots of interesting conversations with them. Uh, I think that more or less covers it.
Okay. Yeah, so everyone watch my community page. I've been posting some things that, yeah, seem to be happily received by some, unhappily received by others. But let's just say there's a little bit more of a connection with Islam and, shall we say, Calvinism and Protestant theology, Protestant political activity, the Reformation movement than is comfortable. Let's just say that. So yeah, Thaddeus, you saw I sent you that link, right? Did you read that little thing that I sent you? Oh, and of
Uh,
course, Shabir Ali admitted that apparently Zoroaster is a prophet of Islam.
Yeah, I
Like,
definitely saw the Zoroastrian clip that you sent me, and she was like, "This is not a problem. We have no problem saying maybe he was a prophet. After all, the Quran says there's lots of prophets, and it barely talks about any of them. So we could just say whoever we want as a
yeah,
prophet
looking
because
at
he
him,
must."
he must have been a prophet. I mean, this pagan Zoroastrian fire worshipper, Ahura Ma. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, we all know that all of Allah's prophets before Muhammad, they're all complete failures. They failed to actually propagate Islam. So maybe, Zoroaster came and he was just teaching pure monotheism exactly like Muhammad, if we can call that pure monotheism. The exact same thing as Muhammad. And then it just all got corrupted somehow because Allah is weak and he can't do anything. But this time it's different. This time it's really different when he's talking about Muhammad. This time he'll protect his revelation.
Yeah, and the Zoroastrians lost the original text that spoke about Muhammad. Would you believe that?
Mm-hmm.
The all the other prophets lost the text that were talking about Muhammad. They just
Yep. And then Allah says, you will find him mentioned in your scriptures, but forgot to mention, your scriptures that you lost a long time ago.
yeah. So that's that. Yeah. So guys, I'll catch you up on some new things afterwards. But good evening. So Arnold, Aniela, Scrunchy, RJ, Harriel Johnson, Nonius Requerides. Yeah, Dragon. Thank you. Good to see you, Prof. Yaffle, Horse, of course. Yeah, Bruce Six, everyone. So yeah, and Joel Thomas, welcome. Yeah, so guys, yeah, I'm aware that I am going to be discussing topics that are very contentious, that are very controversial, and do understand that some people have replied to me by stating the exact same propaganda that I have just been demonstrating to be, shall we say, less than entirely accurate. So please don't assume that what I pasted, if I pasted 2 paragraphs of information, that is the entirety of the information I have at my disposal. I might have gone through 5,000 pages, but I just couldn't paste all 5,000 pages. I just pasted a short summary. So please don't assume that I am going to be ignorant of the things you're posting. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for the moment. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah. Sorry, that is, yeah.
Today's talk, however, I don't think it's going to be very controversial. I mean, even to Muslims, right? Because I'm just taking the Islamic sources and saying what they say. If the Muslims don't like what they have to say, well, then I guess they don't like Islam because I'm just looking at what their sources say.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Because, I mean, look, one of the things, Muslims can't even be honest about what their own sources say. Now, we both know that Aisha was 19, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the Muslims, they're going to show us the Sahih Hadiths on that any second now, right, Thaddeus?
Yeah, 19 or 18 or 17, depending on who you talk to, but certainly not 9. I mean, there's only 14 Sahih Hadith that say she's 9, and 0 that say any other age, but obviously, only an Islamophobe would say that Aisha was 9 years old.
Yeah. So if they can't be honest about their own sources, unfortunately, we can't trust them about anything else. Yeah. Okay. So Thaddeus, dive right in. My apologies. I wasn't able to, for some reason, to have Thaddeus share his screen, so I'm having to share it on this end, which means if he was moving his mouse around, you won't see it. That's my mouse. So, but yeah, Thaddeus, let's jump in.
Yep. Go ahead and go to the first slide here. We kind of already introduced the topic. We're going to start by looking at the origin of Muhammad's prophethood. What better place to start than looking at the origin story? This is found in quite a number of hadith. They vary slightly from one another. I've chosen here Sahih Muslim 160a. We'll look at, I believe, all of the hadith. It's broken up into a couple portions, however. It's a long hadith. It covers basically the entirety of the story. We're going to start with the cave incident and then see what happened after that. I'll go ahead and read it first and then we'll discuss it. The first with which was started the revelation to the messenger of Allah was the true vision in sleep. And he did not see any vision, but it came like a bright gleam of dawn, Henceforth, solitude became dear to him, and he used to seclude himself in the cave of Hira, where he would engage in tahanuth before returning to his family and getting provisions again for this purpose. I like this version of the hadith because they left that word there untranslated. I'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look that up now. Tahanuth. Yeah, I have that actually. That's very odd that they did that.
Excellent. And I'll talk a little bit why, but I would definitely be interested in what you think about that word as well. Let me finish the hadith, though.
Sure.
He would then return to Khadijah and take provisions for a like period, till truth came upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. There came to him the angel and said, "Recite," to which he replied, "I am not lettered." He took hold of me and pressed me till I was hard pressed. Thereafter he led off and said, "Recite." I said, "I am not lettered." Then he took hold of me and pressed me for a second time till I was hard pressed. And he let off of me and said, "Recite."
So my apologies. I'm sharing the wrong thing. No, I'm not. Sorry, keep going. My bad, sorry.
I am not lettered. He took hold of me and pressed me for a third time till I was hard pressed, and then let go of me and said, "Recite in the name of your Lord, who created man from a clot of blood. Recite. And your most bountiful Lord is he who taught the use of the pen, taught men what he knew not." This is, of course, Surah 96, the supposed first revelation.
I just think it's so weird. Some of these narrations say recite, and some say read. Now, if he didn't know, what would he recite? And if he couldn't read, what would he read?
Yeah, and they might be translating the same word, I would have to say for sure. It is a somewhat ambiguous word in Arabic. It can mean read, and that's what Muslims usually interpret it. But I think recite is actually a better translation, or reclaim is another possible
translation. Yeah, because it comes from the Hebrew, and I believe it's to proclaim the Torah.
Yeah, so, but you're exactly right. Either way, he's supposed to... Either he's told to read something he can't read, and like the angel has a physical book in his hand, or if we're just taking it in its context and we're not imagining anything, he's being told to recite something, to recall something from memory that he's never heard before. So very strange behavior. And then this being that they're calling an angel, this being presses down on him. And, this is kind of a nice version here. It doesn't sound so bad, but in other versions, Muhammad's like, "And I thought I was going to die." So something very dramatic is taking place here. I also find the first line of this hadith to be very interesting. It says, "The first with which was started the revelation to the messenger of Allah was the true vision in sleep." So it's saying one of two things. Either it's saying he was sleeping in this cave, or it's saying that he used to get visions in dreams before he became a prophet. Very interesting there. It seems that there's something not quite adding up, that he was maybe trying to get mystical visions. Just keep that in mind.
Okay, well, but it could also mean he was getting... Yeah, so maybe he was getting visions prior that could have been... Yeah, so who knows? That's interesting. So this wasn't a new thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that all of the stories and hadith and sayings of Muhammad and whatnot, that if anything's true, this is probably true, because it kind of bears the marks of something that's historical. Well, first of all, like, different versions of it, they contradict or have discrepancies in small details, which is normal, what you would expect from a story that's actually been passed on orally. I know that Muslims think that makes something unreliable when it comes to the gospel, but that's what you would actually expect in legitimate history. There's also the tahanuth word that is left untranslated here, and I like that they did that, because this is a word that early Muslims really had no idea what it meant, or at least if they did know what it meant, they weren't saying it, because you look at 10 different tafsir, they'll say 10 different things, because they don't really know what this word means. And I also looked at an academic paper from today, and they also can't quite figure out what it means. So Muhammad was doing something in that cave.
So
he was there.
I mean, that word.
Yeah.
Let me bring
So
up.
the
Yeah.
right. So
Um,
the official version that Muslims will, the most often version today that Muslims will say is that it means acts of generosity, which makes absolutely zero sense in context. That's definitely not what it means. But they'll claim that's what it means because I think they don't like the other ideas of what it might mean so much.
yeah. So it says here, tahanuth in the Encyclopedia of Islam, adjective from the Hebrew, a form of religious devotion in which Muhammad is said to have been engaged 1 month each year in a cave on Hira. So he would go there and he would perform some kind of ceremony for a month. He would fast and do things in the cave. It has been hypothesized that tahanuth is the condition one assumes in law when one is liable to fulfill a binding vow, and thus that tahanuth, when referring to the Prophet, reflects the idea that he had made a vow to enter a period of retreat. That's fascinating. Okay, let me have a look here now. So, so they speak here of tahanuth means the adoption, the practice of Islam. This is a different source. The exercise of the true faith. So now you've got two sources that, I'll bring them next to each other. You've got two sources here that are contradicting each other, right? From the Encyclopedia of Islam, right? This one. And then this one, it means the adoption, practice of Islam, the exercise of the true faith. However, in the Hebrew, it means penance, to do penance.
Yeah, and I think that no one's quite sure exactly what it means, but I think it's definitely some sort of religious practice. He's definitely doing something intentional. He's not just in that cave, hanging
Yeah.
out or
Yeah, the
having a
Muslims are
good
making
time.
it up, but it's a known concept, I believe, from like the old Christian view, the old Hebrew view. It's just to do the act of penance.
Yeah, yeah. So he's there. I I think that for our purposes, it's sufficient to say that he's there and he's trying to connect with the spiritual world. To he's trying to have a revelation, let's say, that he is trying to connect with God. And then lo and behold, something happens. This description of the demon or angel pressing on him sounds a lot like sleep paralysis, which is interesting since this suggested that he might have been
Mm-hmm.
getting visions in sleep. Now, sleep paralysis is when your mind wakes up, but your body is still in a sleep state. So you can't move your body. It's a very scary experience that people have. And because it's very, obviously it's terrifying, you're fully conscious and you can't move your body. You feel like you're paralyzed because but your mind naturally shuts off your body while you're sleeping. It's associated with demons. It's associated with demons coming upon people, and let's just say quite often raping them. It's usually associated with sexual type
I've
demons.
said this, that is two things. That's interesting. I've said before, and I said that I haven't really dug into this in depth, but I've mentioned it to you as well. There's the story of Lilith,
Hmm.
right? And I'm not going to go into all the details, but Laylat, the hikmah, the knowledge, the wisdom, and so on. Laylat, Sophia, the wisdom. And the story of Lilith, and Lilith, the first wife of Adam, being the demon that eventually became evil. And she's a succubus. And she would take advantage of men sexually. She was banished to deserts, to dry places and caves. And also the simple fact that, and I haven't discussed this, I've been meaning to get around to it, but people don't realize that demonology was a huge, I mean, enormous integral part of pagan Arab culture at the time of Muhammad, and much longer than and prior to that. It was a big thing, and any prophet or poet, anyone who provided any kind of poetical recitation, anyone who did that would be assumed to have been possessed by a demon. You had to have a demon familiar that would possess him, and the demon would speak. And the more powerful your recitation, the more powerful your demon. And he was proclaiming in the Quran that he doesn't want to be seen as a mad poet. So this is something that's downplayed in the Quran, but actually it was a massive part of the culture, that it was assumed and would have easily been assumed that he was demon possessed, that he was owned by a demon that would occasionally come and visit him and take over.
Yeah. So just keep that background in mind when we look at what Aloyd kind of just alluded to on the next slide, which is what Muhammad thought had happened. Muhammad says, so this is from the Life of Muhammad, common translation by Guillaume. Muhammad says, so I read it and he departed from me. So obviously he's translating as read rather than recite, but he's referring to what the demon told him to do. So after the demon squeezes him 3 times, then Muhammad is able to read or recite whatever. And he departed from me. And I awoke from my sleep. Well, hold on a second. Here in Life of Muhammad, it's explicit that Muhammad was asleep when this happened. Mm-hmm. That's been cleaned up in the Sahih Hadith versions, but here in the earliest biography of Muhammad, it's explicit that he was asleep. And it was as though these words were written on my heart. Now, none of God's creatures was more hateful to me than a poet or a man possessed. I could not even look at them. I thought, woe is me, poet or possessed. Never shall Quraysh say this of me. I will go to the top of the mountain and throw myself down that I may kill myself and gain rest. So this is Muhammad's initial impression, that he's been attacked by a demon. And when it says poet or man possessed, those are kind of 2 ways of saying the same thing.
So they're synonymous. It's actually in the Arab culture, that was synonymous. The greater the poet, the greater the demon that controlled him. The demon, the jinn, same thing.
Exactly. So Muhammad is thinking that he has been possessed to the point where he goes and tries to kill himself. Now, there's some confusion in the stories here. And
in fact, a good poet would give himself over to the demon for that period.
Indeed. So in Life of Muhammad, the order of events is that Muhammad has the experience in the cave, then he tries to kill himself, and then he is calmed down. In the Hadith, the same events happen, but they're in a different order. Muhammad has the cave experience, then he talks to Khadija and Waraka, which we'll get to here on a second, and then Waraka dies almost immediately after this happens to Muhammad in the cave, and then Muhammad tries to kill himself out of sadness that the revelations have stopped after the death of Waraka. But it seems to me that the more likely scenario is that Khadija was at the cave. In the Hadith, he goes home to her, like he's alone in this cave. But when we see what I think happened as we go through these, and bear in mind that this is all introductory and not directly answering to our question of the day. But I think what we'll see is that Muhammad and Khadija were kind of conspiring. They were trying to have this revelation. They were trying to tap into spiritual forces and make Muhammad into a prophet. So I think she was there at the cave.
Are you serious? She was there. So hold on 1 second. Conociendo al Islam. You said I've read that post about Suleiman and the Reformation. Yes. And thank you very much for the support. Much appreciated. Thank you. On that score, there is a text that I have that I've been wanting to talk about at some point. The reason I haven't gotten to it sooner is that it's not very well attested with references. So I'm wary of quoting from it because I can't back up the sources. It's from a scholar that's actually very well known in the field, and he's done other works where he's got really good sources and he knows the subject. But on this one, he didn't provide the necessary references, and I don't have the ability to back up the statements he makes. But he states that Khadija was a priestess in a pagan cult. She was a high priestess. She was a practitioner of magic. And her former husband, right? She was previously married. Her former husband was someone who used to be, in voodoo, they'll claim that you're being ridden by the demon, right? You're being ridden by the jinn. They ride you, right? So he would speak with a familiar, or his demon would possess him and speak through him. His jinn would take him over, and he would predict the future, and people would pay him to predict the future. They would ask him questions. And the way that they got rich, the way that Khadija became so wealthy before she became a merchant woman, is that she made money from her husband's predictions from all the people paying him, and then he died. And then she married Muhammad, thinking, bingo, I can do the same thing again. Thank you, Harriel Johnson. Much appreciated. She says, Jesus is Lord, forever Lord. Thank you. Thaddeus, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, we're not going to see something like that explicitly in the sources that I provide, but I think it's definitely consistent when we look at the story of how Khadijah came to marry Muhammad, which we'll get to in a minute here. If you want to go to the next slide, we're going to get Khadijah's thoughts on what had happened in the cave. So this is going back to Sahih Muslim here, continuing from where we left off. So supposedly in this version, Muhammad runs home to his wife after having this experience. Then the prophet returned therewith. His heart was trembling, and he went to Khadijah and said, wrap me up, wrap me up. So they wrapped him till the fear had left him. Then he said to Khadijah, O Khadijah, what has happened to me? And he informed her of the happening, saying, I fear for myself. She replied, it can't be. Be happy. I swear by Allah, he shall never humiliate you. By Allah, you join ties of relationship. You speak the truth. You bear people's burdens. You help the destitute. You entertain guests. And you help against the vicissitudes which affect people. So these are some of the qualities of Muhammad that he supposedly has. And these are what we're going to be comparing. This is Muhammad before his revelation. And this is why Khadijah is telling him that he couldn't possibly be possessed by a demon, because he supposedly is this great person who joins ties of relationship, speaks the truth, bears people's burdens, and so forth. He has all these great positive attributes, and by her logic, that means he couldn't have been attacked by a demon. It must be a positive force that came upon him in the temple, or I'm sorry, in the cave. And
Yeah.
the cats are being destructive over here, tearing down my green screen.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's hope they don't. I saw them yesterday. They were quite crazy.
Yeah, they're going a bit wild over here. So if that happens, that happens. Anyway, there's a couple interesting things here. He runs home to his wife for comfort. Instead of trying to commit suicide, like in Life of Muhammad. But he immediately asks her to wrap him up, which is a very strange thing to say, unless she knows what's going on, unless they both know what's going on, that he has been practicing mysticism. He's been trying to conjure up spirits. And why do I say that? Well, because they would wrap themselves in blankets to protect themselves against the spiritual world. How exactly that works or is supposed to work, I don't know, but that's the way the practice worked, derived from Jewish mysticism, Merkabah mysticism, in which a Jewish sage would wrap themselves up in a blanket before trying to ascend into God's throne room. And they were trying to force their way into having this relationship with God because they lack a personal savior. They lack Jesus. So they're trying to force this relationship. Whether Muhammad was practicing Jewish mysticism specifically or a pagan practice that either inspired it or was derived from it, you could debate which way the influence went. Either way, he seems to be practicing mysticism. That's the only way this detail in the story makes any sense. It has no Islamic meaning. There's nothing Islamic about this. It seems to me that this is probably a detail that is historically reliable, and it's been left in there because when they were whitewashing the sources, they had forgotten what this was actually telling the audience about what was going on.
That's probably true. Conathiendo al-Islam says, so was he a better person before those revelations came with Jibril? That's a hard one to answer, right? We don't know because we don't know anything. Everything about his life before the age of supposedly like 40 or whatever, or when he got married, is apocryphal. None of it's attested. So yeah, I mean he just appears at a certain age and that's it. Moving on,
Yeah, so we're just gonna take these sources for granted here. We're going to take Khadijah's description of Muhammad for granted here, saying that he speaks the truth and entertains guests and whatnot. And we're going to compare whether he still does those things after the revelation. So we're pretending that this is reliable. Often this is used as evidence for Islam, like exactly the same way Khadijah is using it here. Like, he must have been a true prophet because he was such a good person, as if that logically followed, right? Just because you're a good person doesn't mean you can't be deceived by a demon in a cave. Or maybe he was a charlatan from the very beginning, and he was intentionally trying to conjure demons, and he was living a good life in public, a respectable life, I should say, in public, while doing these things in practice. People who are practicing the occult don't usually go around telling random people they meet, hey, by the way, did you know that I was doing occult practices in my basement last night?
Unless they do CrossFit or they're a vegan, then they will tell you.
Right. Right, exactly. So if you want to go on to the next slide, here's our test of truth, right? Our test whether Islam makes you a better person by the example of Muhammad coming from Jesus, where he says in the Gospel of Matthew, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. You will recognize them by their fruits. So we see before Muhammad becomes a prophet, if we're taking the sources for granted, that he has many good qualities. To bring up what we've seen so far, and we're going to add a couple more after we get the finish Muhammad's story of the revelation. But we've seen that he keeps good social relations, that he speaks the truth, and he's an honest person. He bears people's burdens, which I'm interpreting as he's empathetic. He feels for those in less fortunate positions. He helps the destitute. So not only does he have empathy for those less well off, he gives of his own resources to them. He entertains guests, which is put in here mostly for fun, but it is part of what Khadijah said. And he helps against the vicissitudes which affect people, which means he fights against bad fortunes. If things are happening to people, they are experiencing tragedy in his life, or they're being downtrodden, they're being oppressed, they're being made into dhimmis, let's say, then he fights against those injustices in the world, at least according to the sources.
I just want to say thank you to Kitsune. Thank you very much. Thank you for the support. Much appreciated. And he asks, do you have the source of Muhammad sneaking up on the Jewish child wrapped in a blanket doing mysticism? I always found that one disturbing. Islam Critiqued actually does a discussion on that one that I quite liked. So have a look on Islam Critique's channel, the child in the blanket. Now, I don't think he really goes into the depth and detail that he could, but he certainly hints at what this is, and clearly there's a level of magic there. And also, it should be noted that people speak of, now look, first of all, you had Merkaba mysticism, right? The Jewish Merkaba, and that became a popularized form that is commonly called Kabbalah, right? However, don't forget the Muslims had their own version of it called Kabbalah, right? So there was a Muslim version of this mysticism as well that they called, this is their own form of it. So there's different forms of it, and Kabbalah is a very late form of it, which seems to be, to me, it seems to be derived from the Muslim version. Thanks. Back to you, Thaddeus.
Yeah, and I don't know the number of that hadith off the top of my head, but it's in one of the Sahih canonical collections, and it can be found at sunnah.com. So if you want to go on, we'll finish up what Sahih Muslim 160 has to say. Khadijah then took him to Waraka. So after Khadijah tells Muhammad that he's a prophet because he's a nice person, basically, she takes him to Waraka, who is apparently the family expert on these matters. He is her cousin, and he says, and he was the man who embraced Christianity in the days of ignorance, and he used to write books in Arabic, and therefore wrote Injil in Arabic as God willed that he should write. He was very old and had become blind. Khadijah said to him, "O uncle, listen to the son of your brother." Waraka ibn Naful said, "O my nephew, what do you see?" And the messenger of Allah then informed him that what he had seen, and Waraka said to him, "It is Namus that God sent down to Musa." They also left this word untranslated. Now, a couple things of note here. In addition to Namus, which sometimes Muslims tell us is supposed to mean Jibril, which is a little ridiculous that they're saying that, Jibril was sent down, so that's what it means. It most likely means, well, first of all, today in contemporary Islam, it means like kind of honor, and that it's the honor you hold. That's definitely not what it means here. That's definitely not what it means in context. It probably means law. That's probably the best guess as to what it means. But again, it's one of these words that the original meaning is kind of lost by the time that Muslims are writing commentary on these sources. So they're not 100% sure what it means.
The law, Arabic gives prevalence to the law adopted from the Septuagint translation, Honomus al-Namus. Yeah, but I can look through my sources on this one as you go, but that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think the idea here is that, according to Waraka, Muhammad is receiving the same law that was sent down to Moses, that he is consistent with what the Quran says about itself, that he is just another prophet in the same line, revealing the same message that has been revealed before, and he's doing it in the language of Arabic because that message supposedly is already in Arabic. However, note what this source says about Waraka, that he wrote the Injil in Arabic as God willed that he should write, i.e., he's doing some kind of channeling practice. And
yes.
He's tapping into some spirit here, right? He's claiming, he thinks it's God, but he's tapping into some sort of spirit. That spirit's inspiring him to write, and he thinks he's writing the Injil. He thinks he's writing the gospel. Apparently, there was a prophet before Muhammad in his own family, probably his teacher on how to practice mysticism. So he goes to Waraka, who's the family expert on mysticism, and he says, "Yes, you are a prophet. I know this because I too have been channeling spirits. I too have been receiving the Injil, and I've been writing it in Arabic." Very interesting, since it supposedly didn't exist in Arabic. It supposedly is impossible that Muhammad could have heard it before, but here in their own sources, in Sahih Muslim, it says that Waraka is getting revelation in Arabic.
Crazy. I just found this in the Encyclopedia of Islam, Encyclopedia of the Quran, sorry, which is like 5,000 pages long. It says Namus, term found in early Muslim tradition on the Prophet's life, but not explicitly mentioned in the Quran. Its original meaning was the revealed law. The original meaning was the revealed law, but later it was changed as a designation for the angel gibberish. In early Arabic translation of a gospel fragment, the Greek expression entono nomo auton, which means the law of the Jews, is rendered, and then it gets back to Namus, that is rendered phil namus. So this means the law of the Jews was rendered phil namus. So the word namus, the earlier source here, is the law of the Jews. This would be the Talmud.
Indeed. And in the Hadith, I believe that Muhammad quotes the Talmud and says it's Allah's book, which is supposed to be the Quran, but that's not in the Quran. It's only in the Talmud.
That is nuts.
Yeah, so Jewish law, right? It says here that it's the law of the Jews. In Sahih Muslim, it says it's the law that God sent down to Moses. The law of the Jews seems pretty consistent, doesn't it? Seems a lot better meaning for the word than Jibril, like Muslims claim it means today.
Angie says, my apologies for interrupting again, Thaddeus. Lloyd, the amount of work you put into research is beyond. I've just finished the Monotheism Part 1. Thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate the comments. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you kindly. Yeah, so go on, Thaddeus. Yeah.
Yep. So if you hit advance, it's going to have a little pop-up here. In a different Sahih narration, this one from Sahih Bukhari, it says the same thing, but it says that Waraka would write the gospel in Hebrew as much as Allah wished him to write. So maybe he was receiving revelation in Arabic, maybe it was in Hebrew, maybe it was actually Aramaic, i.e. Syriac, that he was receiving the revelation. Because, I say that because a lot of the Quran is borrowed from Syriac Christian texts.
Yeah, the bulk of it is Syriac Aramaic. That's true.
So regardless of the language here, Waraka definitely seems to be channeling a spirit. He definitely seems to be claiming that he is writing the gospel, not like, some random thing, but the gospel that supposedly didn't exist and was corrupt and whatever other nonsense Muslims come up with today to try to excuse the fact that Muhammad just plagiarized a bunch of sources that existed. According to Sahih Muslim, according to Sahih Bukhari, Waraka had access to that text. Muhammad's uncle. Or uncle-in-law, I suppose, technically.
Yeah. Yeah, but even Waraka ibn Nawfal, even his existence is very tenuous historically. There's no real evidence he ever existed. And his first name is pagan, and his surname is also linked to pagan sources. And in fact, his father's name is, I think it's Abd al-Uzza, right? Slave of al-Uzza. So he seems to have very strong pagan links. And if he's a Christian, I mean, well, it's just what kind of Christian, So he's clearly involved in this milieu that's entirely pagan.
Oh, yeah. It claims that he was the man who embraced Christianity, but let's be real here. He's not a Christian at all. He's practicing mysticism. He may think he's a Christian, right? Or he may not exist at all. This might be a made-up story to project what Muhammad was actually doing onto another figure to kind of clean up Muhammad's biography.
Yeah.
But whoever this figure is, right? He's not a Christian.
Can I mention something?
He's channeling.
Muslims call themselves the Mu'mineen, right? They call themselves Mu'mineen, and the Jews have a term called the Ha-Minim. So short version is, the Muslims, by this they mean believers, right? For the Jews, this word means heretics, okay? And the word min is a heretic, right? So the Jews and the Christians were calling them heretics. And the Muslims embraced it and said, yeah, that's us. We're the believers because we have the true faith. But the odd thing is the word manim seems to derive from the word mene. Mene derives from a guy that everyone knows here called Mani, the Manichaean. Which is really odd. So the manim, in other words, these Manichaean heretics, because Manichaeism is by no means Christianity, and it seems that this word refers to Mani.
Could be. So we'll go ahead and wrap up the introduction here on the next slide, finishing out the story with a different explanation of Muhammad's prophethood, or a proof supposedly of it from life of Muhammad. And this is also the story of why Khadijah married Muhammad according to Islam, right? Not according to me. According to Islam, this is why she married him. So Muhammad is hired as a trader, as a merchant for Waraka, who is the business owner, or for Khadijah, sorry, who is the business owner. And she sends him off to a foreign land with some goods to trade them, as would be normal practice. And here's what the narration says. The apostle stopped in the shade of a tree near a monk's cell. When the monk came up to Masara and asked who the man was resting beneath the tree, he told him that he was of the Quraysh, the people who held the sanctuary. And the monk exclaimed, "None but a prophet ever sat beneath this tree." So Masara
is none
yeah,
but a prophet ever bought this brand a cell phone.
Exactly. Apparently sitting under a tree, a particular tree near this supposed monk, is proof that you're a prophet.
Yeah.
No one but prophets sit under the tree.
This
in the
brand
hot
of water,
sun.
prophets only, prophet water.
Exactly. Just such a ridiculous proof of his prophethood that they put in the mouth of this supposed monk here. Masara is Muhammad or Khadija's slave, just to be clear who this figure is. And this monk comes out of his cell and he's like, "Oh my goodness, that guy's sitting below the sacred tree. He must be a prophet." So that's what he tells Masara. And then on the way home, so Muhammad goes about, I guess he didn't actually hear this, it wasn't told to him directly or whatever. The monk's like, "That guy's a prophet, but I'm not going to go talk to him or anything. I'm just going to go about my day. Just so you know, though, he's a prophet." And then the story continues. Muhammad goes about and he sells his goods. The prophet sold the goods that he had brought and bought what he wanted to buy and began the return journey to Mecca. The story goes that in the height of noon, when the heat was intense, as he rode his beast, Masara saw two angels shading the apostle from the sun's rays. Where he brought Khadija her property, she sold it and amounted to double or thereabouts. So he did a good job. He doubled his money. Masara, for his part, saw her about two angels. Masara, for his part, told her, yes, about the two angels who shaded him and of the monk's words. So Masara, the slave, is the witness to these two angels that apparently Muhammad didn't see, and the witness to the monk's words, which apparently Muhammad didn't hear. Now, Khadija does something very interesting here, but the text describes her in a very interesting way as well. Now, Khadija was a determined, noble, and intelligent woman, possessing the properties with which God willed her to honor her. So when Masara told her these things, she sent to the apostle of God, and so the story goes, said, "O son of my uncle, I like you because of our relationship and your high reputation among your people, your trustworthiness and your good character and truthfulness." So she proposed marriage. Now, that's very interesting. So it describes her in, positive terms: determined, noble, intelligent. You could look at those same traits and give them negative words, like she's cunning, she's very determined to make a fortune, right? She sees that he's good at trading and made a lot of money, and she hears that he might be a prophet, and she says, "Oh, Muhammad, let's get married." Very, very interesting here.
Okay, so she wasn't thinking to. I mean, look. To be honest, I mean, given my sexy looks, you can tell that women used to come up to me and go, "You're sexy. We need to get married right now." Not because of my my trustworthiness, my good character, because that was boring, right? So, but Muhammad's good character was of such a nature that she was like, "You look like I can make money off you," right? Does this look like a marriage of convenience or one that's based on an actual?
Yeah. They don't seem to have any relationship. I mean, she says because of our good relationship, but the way the story is told, they don't really seem to have any relationship. She's just a guy who works for her. He makes her some money, and according to her slave, he is going to be a prophet. And she's like, I think I could use this guy.
If Muhammad had the character like Thaddeus, your wife came to you and she said, "Thaddeus, you're a sexy beast. I want you," right? That's how that happens. That's true love. That's infatuation. That's like, "Oh my God, this man's amazing." But it's like, "Thaddeus, you look like a hard worker who can build me a house." That's not going to turn me on. There's like there's something missing in
Right.
that description. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
I see you have lots of money. I would like to marry you.
Yeah, I don't know. The story doesn't add up. It just sounds like propaganda.
So from this, we got a couple more attributes. We got that Muhammad was a skilled tradesman, an honest tradesman. He goes about his normal behavior. We have that he's recognized as someone who is going to be an authority figure. We have that he has a very good reputation and that he's trustworthy and truthful. So summing it all up here, let the test begin. If you want to go to the next slide. So here's what we've learned, right? From taking the Islamic text seriously, looking at both the life of Muhammad, the earliest biography of him, or at least the earliest one that has survived to this day, and the Sahih Hadith, this is what we find, that he was a keeper of good social relations, that he was an honest and skilled tradesman. He's the faithful husband of one wife.
Until she passes on, and then the guy goes wild.
That wasn't explicit in what we saw, but yeah, from all accounts, he was faithful to Khadijah. He lived faithfully to her, didn't cheat on her, didn't have any other wives until she died. That he was trustworthy, that he was truthful, that he was the bearer of burdens, or that he was empathetic, that he helps the poor or unfortunate, or that he's generous, and he entertains guests, and overall, summing it all up, he's a generally well-respected guy of good character. That's what we see before. Then after, that's what we're going to find out. I'm going to try to take these things in roughly the order of supposed revelation. We're going to see the give it away is that little by little his revelations override every one of these characteristics. That everything that was good about Muhammad, according to Islam's own sources, according to Islam itself, not according to me, not according to my interpretation, but every one of these traits is directly contradicted by a revelation from Allah, telling Muhammad to stop being that way and be the opposite.
It's just interesting that Muslims try so hard to make Muhammad out to be the world's most virtuous man, the most perfect example to ever live, a man of great character, and yet they fail. None of us buy it. So few people outside of Islam are willing to accept this narrative. I mean, how do you struggle to take someone who's so perfect? And I mean, they clearly have to overlook all of these massive defects, but he's such a perfect man, and yet they can't convince anybody of it. Why is that?
Exactly. You'll know them by their fruits. So there's two hypotheses on the table. One is that Muhammad's a true prophet receiving revelation from the creator of the universe, who is a good and loving God. If that were the case, we would expect that his good traits would be emphasized, and that he's supposedly pretty much already a perfect guy, right? So I don't know how much better he can get, but he certainly wouldn't get worse. He'd be better. It would emphasize the good. He'd be like the most generous person to ever live, the most trustworthy person to ever live, the kind of things that Muslims say about Muhammad. My hypothesis is that he was probably trying to connect with God, but what he actually got was a demon. And his initial impression was correct. He was attacked by a demon. And Khadijah and Waraka convinced him otherwise, convinced him to go with this spirit that had this evil spirit who had tried to contact him. And as a result of this spirit being evil, it overrode any good that was in him over time, made him worse and worse person, until he became one of the worst people to ever live, the exact opposite of what Muslims claim about him. So we'll now go through these one by one, starting with whether he was a keeper of good social relations. The messenger of God, so this is from History of Al-Tabari. The messenger of God proclaimed God's message openly and declared Islam publicly to his tribesmen. When he did so, they did not withdraw from him or reject him in any way, as far as I heard, until he spoke of their gods and denounced him. So this is the how it begins, right? Muhammad decides I'm a prophet. Waraka or Khadijah or whoever convinced him that he's a prophet. He starts going out and peacefully preaching his message, peacefully talking about his revelations.
Mm.
And no one really had a problem with him, according to their sources, right? Perfectly fine. He's keeping good social relationship. Al-Tabari continues. After this, the situation deteriorated. Hostility became more bitter, and people withdrew from one another and showed open hatred to one another. Then the Quraysh incited one another against those in their various clans who had become companions of the messenger of God and had accepted Islam with him. So people some small number of people, keep in mind it's not a lot at this point, but some small number of people accept Muhammad's message and start following him. And does peace and harmony spread through the land? No, they start being vicious with the Quraysh who are not accepting Muhammad as a prophet. They start breaking good social relations. They start sowing strife in their community.
You know, this is like a literal application of the words of Jesus, like, you know, there will be strife between brother and brother. But I think that's more, there will be disagreements in the sense that you will adopt a set of moral values that others will disagree with, but Muhammad actually took it to the point of violence and aggression and outright ridicule, which is, it's almost like this extreme and inverted application of the Gospels, in a sense.
Indeed. And to be clear, right, if Muhammad is teaching a true message and people are rejecting it, there will be strife between them. This is just the start, right? Right here, you could easily, as a Muslim, say, yes, he broke social relationships, but he did so for the sake of the truth. However, notice how the people describe Muhammad. So they, being the Quraysh who are rejecting Muhammad as a prophet, say, "We have never seen the like of which we have endured from this man. He has derided our traditional values, abused our forefathers, reviled our religion, caused division amongst us, and insulted our gods. We have endured a great deal from him," or they said some words to that effect. Now, isn't that what Muslims are always telling us that we're doing? Aren't they always telling us that we're reviling their religion, we're abusing their forefathers, we're insulting their God? Apparently it's okay if Muhammad does it. So why are they complaining when we do it?
Yeah. I mean, also Muslims seem to, the thing is, they have millions of hadith, 99% of which they reject. Right? So of these 2 million or more hadiths, they only keep like 20,000 as valid. And yet all of these nasty things are written. These are factually things that are part of the scriptural and the corpus of Islam, right? Of the religious corpus of Islam. And they say things about Muhammad. And then we're told, oh, they're weak. I mean, how does claiming that your own sources are weak and unreliable make Islam true? And why are they in the sources? Why didn't they say, look, these are unreliable, these are rejected, these are absolutely, we shouldn't even be using them. I mean, you know, and say, sorry, but this is not part of our corpus. But yet these are written by Muslims, written by proper Muslims, written by proper scholars, written by respected, revered members of the Islamic intellectual and religious community. And it just doesn't make sense. All of these things, I mean, can't all be false. It's just too much evidence against Muhammad in their own sources.
Indeed. Yeah, they'll tell us that, you know, we don't follow the history of Al-Tabari. We don't follow Ibn Ishaq. Well, guess what? These were the most important, most scholarly, learned Muslims of their day. So you telling me that these people passing on these stories, which, by the way, predate the collection of the hadith, that they had no clue. They were just making up lies about Islam, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, you should believe Islam's the truth, because you see in Islam, whatever we like, those are true sources. Whatever we don't like, those are false sources. We can make Islam whatever we want it to be. All hail Islam, I guess.
Yeah. Next slide.
So that's the first one, right? Yep. So that's the first one. Not so bad, right? We would maybe expect that a true prophet would cause some strife in society. What about being an honest trader? So this is now the second stage of Muhammad's prophethood. After he's been going around Mecca preaching his message for a dozen years, 20 years, whatever number exactly, the sources vary a little bit on that. He's got a handful of followers, maybe like 20 followers in total after all that time. Not very many people find his message appealing. Life of Muhammad. The apostle had not been given permission to fight or allowed to shed blood before the Kaaba. He had simply been ordered to call men to God and to endure insult and forgive the ignorant. The first verses which sent down on this subject, from which I have heard from Uwa ibn al-Zubair and other learned persons. Permission is given to those who fight because they have been wronged. So this early stage, right, this very early stage, Muhammad just has to endure all the insults, all the things that are said about him. Then the second stage, he's given permission to fight back. Conveniently, right when he had enough followers to be able to do so, his God, or whatever he's serving, gives him permission to start fighting defensively. I'm going to put defensively in quotes here because we see how he fights defensively.
Actually,
Good.
It says in the Sirat that when Allah gave permission to his apostle to fight, the second oath of allegiance at Aqaba. So Muslims always quote the very first oath of Aqaba, or the very first oath, but the second oath is more important. And this contained conditions involving war, which were not in the first act of loyalty. Muhammad's followers bound themselves to war against all and sundry for Allah and Muhammad, and he promised them for faithful service the reward of paradise. So he offered them death. Paradise for death. That's what Muhammad offered them. So this is in the second oath at Aqaba, as opposed to the first one. So Muslims, they love to talk about the first one. The second one they tend to overlook. So bear that in mind. Yeah.
So we're going to see how Muhammad's followers fought defensively. What we might call robbing caravans, actually. So the Quraysh said, Muhammad and his companions have violated the sacred month, shed blood therein, taken booty, and captured men. The Muslims in Mecca who opposed them said they had done it in Shaban. So no one's disputing that. So obviously, I for the sake of the slide, I only put a small portion of the story. You can read the whole story in Ibn Ishaq if you want. But this is kind of the summary, right? So Muhammad's men attack the caravans that have been, they're just regular trade caravans bringing goods. They attack these caravans, and their excuse is that the people of Mecca are against them, so they deserve this, basically. Now, the Quraysh say that Muhammad's men did it on the first day of the sacred month. Muhammad and his men say that they did it on the last day of the month before the sacred month. That's the only dispute. No one disputes that they attacked this caravan in this completely unjustifiable manner. They're just saying, no, we didn't do it in the sacred month. We did it on the last day of the month before the sacred month.
Yeah.
So then Allah's revelation, right? This is explicitly supposedly revelation from Allah in response is that why did you attack that caravan in the first place? Why are you killing people? Why are you taking their stuff and shedding their blood? No, this is what the revelation that came down from God supposedly finds its way into the Quran. They will ask you about the sacred month and war in it. Say, war therein is a serious matter, but keeping people from the way of God and disbelieving in him and in the sacred mosque and driving out his people from there is more serious with God. I.e., if you have killed in the sacred month, they have kept you back from the way of God with their unbelief in him and from the sacred mosque and have driven you from when you were its people. This is a more serious matter with God than the killing of them whom you have slain. So Allah says, don't worry about it. Maybe it was the last day. Maybe it was the first day. Doesn't make any difference. They deserved it. They deserve to be killed because you know what? They're opposing Islam. This is how we wage a defensive jihad in Islam is that whoever opposes you, you attack their unarmed caravans, steal their stuff, kill their people. They deserve it.
Piracy. Yeah. Before you go on, I want to say thank you to Perry.8877. Thank you very much. I appreciate the donation. And to HAC for subscribing. I mean, this is piracy. This is piracy.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you justify this? And of course, Muslims like Thaddeus, he didn't interpret it correctly. You know, his feelings were hurt, and that's...
Yeah, it's purely defense because those caravan traders were from the same city that insulted Muhammad, so they clearly deserved it.
Right.
So we have Muhammad going from an honest trader to a caravan robber. Seems that his God has overrode his positive trait again.
How many caravans did Jesus rob with the apostles?
All the prophets before Muhammad behaved the same way, right? So he must have robbed some.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, you know, did Jesus like rob any caravans? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that he's told his disciples when they go out into a new town not to carry any substantial amount of money with them, probably because they're going to rob the caravan, right? And that's why he said that.
Yeah, there's banks in the towns, so you know.
Yeah, don't bring any money with you. Just
Kush
rob
says
the people.
Allah only made it appear as if he robbed the caravans. It didn't really happen. Thank you. Thanks for explaining. Yeah, that there you go. Yeah, he's a mafioso. He runs on women, money, and power. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So our next character trait is that Muhammad is a faithful husband. Let's see if that holds true after Khadijah dies. It was narrated that Ibn Abbas said, when the Messenger of Allah died, he had 9 wives. He used to be intimate with all of them except one, who had given her day and night to Aisha. 9 wives. I thought that there was a maximum number of wives that the Quran allows you to have. I believe that number
8. So he went over by 1. I mean, that's pretty bad. I think. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it might be 4. Yeah. Jesus Seeker says kaf 4.
Oh.
Now, my math's not very good, Lloyd, but I think 9 is larger than 4, isn't it?
Are you using Mossad mathematics? Because as Alexander says here, we are Jews and we work for Mossad. That is, so your maths is suspect. In fact, I mean, if you're Jewish, then we can't trust the maths. And it says 4, but you don't understand probably something about the 4ness of a number is just a fullness of the oneness of a number. You know, and marriage is nothing but a number, Thaddeus, or something.
And I believe it was Zakir Naik or maybe Ahmadinejad who first said that the Quran is the only scripture that says you can marry 1 wife.
At a time.
Finish the sentence. He doesn't finish the sentence where it says or 2 or 3 or 4. But, you know, maybe he was faithful to all 9 of his wives at the same time. That's possible, right? Well, what about that 1, right? Except 1 who had given her day and night to Aisha. Why did he do that? Well, it seems that in the 2 Sahihs, it is recorded that Aisha said that when Sada bint Zama became old, she forfeited her day to Aisha, and the Prophet used to spend Sada's night with Aisha.
Thaddeus, hold on. He actually only had 4.5 wives.
Okay.
Because a woman is only worth half a man, so she's half a person, so it's only 4.5. Or 4.25, or something. So
yeah,
2 is 1. 1 is half.
And I mean, Aisha's so small that she barely counts. So maybe he only has 4.
Yep. There you go. That's Islamic mathematics.
So Sada gets too old. She thinks that she's no longer attractive to Muhammad. And what does he do? Does he say, no, 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 Sada, I still love you. You're being silly. I would always want you. No. What happens instead? What happens instead is that he gets a revelation from Allah, which is what's in the parentheses here. And if a woman fears cruelty or desertion on her husband's part, that's added by the translator. The Quran is here in the quotes, but the translator justifiably, right? They've summarized what the Quran means. That it refers to, and then quotes the Quran, a man who is married to an old woman and he does not desire and wants to divorce her. So she says, I forfeit my right to you. So this ayah was revealed. So sorry about the confusion there. Sorry. The part in the parentheses is the Quranic part, and then the other part is the explanation. I got confused about what the hadith is saying. But in any case, right, the gist is the same, right? That the Quran comes down. It says that this arrangement that Sada arranged, this is something ordained by God. If you're a woman and your husband no longer desires you, just go ahead and give up your marital rights and stay married to him rather than divorce him, or rather than he divorce you, I mean. Because obviously you're a woman, you don't have any right to divorce. That this is a good thing. This is what Allah ordains. Marriage isn't something sacred. It's just a contract. You pay some money, you get access to the woman's vagina. This is marriage in Islam. So if you want to modify that contract later, no problem. You want to say, you take your marital rights and you give them to your favorite child bride. Just make sure I still have a place to live. Allah is fine with that. So Allah says, or Muhammad naturally lives as God intended in a one man, one woman relationship where they're faithful to one another. Allah tells him to stop doing that. No longer about marriage is no longer about love. It's no longer about two becoming one. It's about you buying access to a woman's vagina.
Yeah. And obviously the laws don't apply to him. He's set apart. He's special. I mean, he was just a warner, just a regular man, just a warner. And we who are against polygamy, we are supposed to accept this as normal. I mean, Muslims don't understand that this is all outside of our moral, social, and legal framework. And why would we want to accept this? Which is why they need to force it on us or deceive us about this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as Ange pointed out, the word is nikah, which means to fuck. It's a dirty word in Arabic, and that's the word they use for marriage, at least in the Quran. They do have another word.
Legal sexual conjugations, otherwise you get killed for fornication. That's pretty much it. It just, you get legalized sex. There's no, in fact, within the Sharia, there is no concept of a love marriage. It's you have the legal right to do this, otherwise you'll die.
Exactly. So Muhammad, he's going around having sex with 8 women apparently every night. Think he'd be he's got 8 wives that he's actually having sex with. Surely he'll be faithful to them. Well, maybe not. As we'll see in the next slide when we look at Mary the Copt. So we'll now examine whether Muhammad was trustworthy. And this is in relation to Mary, as I just alluded to. It was narrated from a Naskh that the messenger of Allah had a female slave, which is Mary the Copt, with whom he had intercourse. But Aisha and Hafsa would not leave him alone until he said that she was forbidden for him. Then Allah, the mighty and sublime, revealed in the Quran, O Prophet, why do you forbid that which Allah has allowed to you, until the end of the verse. So Muhammad, 9 women, not enough for him. He wants to have sex with his slaves as well. And then his wives don't like that. 2 of his wives, at least, don't like that. Saying, Muhammad, stop this crap. You can have sex with us. Stop having sex with your slaves. And Muhammad's like, all right. I swear I will stop having sex with Mary the Copt. Until Allah sends a revelation to Muhammad and says, why have you forbidden yourself this slave? You need to have sex with her because Allah has allowed it. The Sahih Hadith explaining the revelation of this verse of the Quran continues, O Prophet, why do you prohibit what Allah has made lawful for you, seeking the approval of your wives? And Allah is forgiving and merciful. Allah has already ordained for you the dissolution of your oaths. And Allah is your protector, and He is the knowing, the wise. Notice the translator tries to add you Muslims, but really this is actually just for Muhammad, right? Allah has ordained for you, Muhammad, the dissolution of your oaths. They try to make it all Muslims, as if that somehow makes it better. So Muhammad's trustworthy. He keeps his promises. Allah says, stop doing that. I have foreordained for you to break your promises. Very interesting how his revelations are repeatedly overturning his positive character traits that he is said to possess.
Allah has ordained for you to break your oaths. So your oath to your wife. So it's okay. I have legislated for you infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it's saying. Am I reading that correctly, Thaddeus?
Yeah. And I will be clear that this is only one of two stories about the revelation of the verse. And the other one, it's supposedly about Muhammad eating some food that made his breath smell bad. But either way, he promises to his wives to stop doing that act. And then Allah tells him that, what are you doing? You can break your oaths to your wives. So you can make a promise and you can break the promise. It doesn't actually, obviously it's more disgusting if he's trying to have sex with even more women, but the gist is the same in either version, even in the nicer version that Muslims will refer to, or in this version, which is also in the Sahih Hadith collections, that Muhammad is told by Allah to break his oath. He makes a promise to his wives. He swears up and down, I'll stop doing that, whatever they're bothering him about. Then Allah says, no, Muhammad, you need to break your oath. You need to do whatever is annoying your wives. What a God. What a God.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're ready to take your shahada.
The Shana, I'm going to need a bit more convincing. Going to need a tad more convincing. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, I got more revelation from Allah. So our next character trait is that Muhammad helps the poor, that he's generous with his income, with his resources. We have a couple Sahih statements here, and as well as a statement from the life of Muhammad, which Muslims will reject, but it doesn't actually teach anything different than the Sahih. It's just more clear about it. According to Sahih Bukhari, Allah's apostle said, booty has been made legal for me, that I am allowed to take war goods and keep them for myself. In Ibn Ishaq's Life of Muhammad, we get a more in-depth description of that. Then he taught them how to divide the spoil in his judgment about when he made it lawful to them, and said, and know that what you take as booty, a fifth belongs to God and the apostle and next of kin and orphans and the poor and the wayfarer. If you believe in God and what we sent down to our servant on the day of the Furqan, the 2 days of the armies, the day the two armies met, and God is able to do all things. So they've captured a bunch of stuff in war, and Muhammad says, know that 1/5 of whatever you captured today, it belongs to God and his apostle, and then the other things. Now, I don't think Allah can take any goods, so that's going to Muhammad. Now, next of kin and orphans and poor and wayfarer, that's up to Muhammad to distribute resources to them, so that goes to Muhammad as well. So 1/5 of all goods captured in war goes to God and the apostle? Nah, it goes to Muhammad. 1/5 of whatever they capture comes to Muhammad. Now, in fairness to Muhammad, he didn't necessarily keep all this for himself. He did distribute some money to orphans and the poor. He did also use a lot of the money that he gathered to buy loyalty, to bribe people into converting to Islam. So he wasn't necessarily getting like super rich off this. But the point being, he used to take his money and give it to others. Now he's taking others people's money and maybe possibly giving it to the poor.
Yeah. You know, the former South African president had 14 wives, if I recall. You know, we're not supposed to criticize that because that's culture, you know, cultural. But I mean, he had 14 wives and I don't know what, 60, 70 children. And we're supposed to accept this as something that is modern and acceptable. And we're supposed to let all things be because, you know, we're tolerant and like, and this is primitive tribal behavior. And we're supposed to assume now that because Muhammad sets the example for all Muslims for eternity, whatever he does is right. It cannot be criticized. It cannot be declared to be wrong. And it's the example for all men to follow. So this example of his, I mean, it's primitive.
Indeed. If you don't like Life of Muhammad, maybe you don't even like Sahih Bukhari. Well, what about the Quran? Let's just look at what Allah says in the Quran. Thee ask thee, O Muhammad, of the spoils of war. Say, the spoils of the war belong to Allah and the Messenger. So keep your duty to Allah, and adjust the matter of your difference, and obey Allah and His Messenger, if ye are believers. So if you're believers, know that the spoils of war belong to Allah and His Messenger. This verse in the Quran actually doesn't limit it to a fifth. So you want to reject Ibn Ishaq? Well, guess what? You just got rid of limiting Muhammad to a fifth. He can take as much of the spoils of war as he wants because it belongs to Allah and the Messenger. And Allah, well, you know, He's up in heaven. He can't enter in this world. He doesn't have any use for those resources. Yeah. They all go to Muhammad. Very generous guy, I guess.
Yeah, it belonged to Allah and the Messenger. And yeah, Muhammad's the keeper of the the spoils for the Messenger. That's crazy. I mean, how many houses did Jesus own? How many wives did he have? How many people did he personally kill or have lined up in front of him to be killed? I know atheists are now going to quote Luke 19, is it? Verse 24, where Jesus is telling a parable, and they're going to say, well, you know, Jesus said, you know, no, he told a story, but, you know, but I don't recall anything like that happening, that he told, okay, well, line up these people in front of me and chop their heads off from dawn till dusk with his little 6-year-old bride next to him. And this is crazy.
Yeah, Jesus says that the animals have places to live, goes through a couple animals, and he says, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Seems Jesus didn't own any property. Seems that he didn't take any spoils of war. Now, says whoever lives by the sword dies by the sword. Muhammad says, come die by the sword and get your virgins in paradise. Very stark contrast there.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
But wait,
yeah,
we're not done. We're not done. Lots more. And now we're really going to start laying it on thick here, unfortunately. And I don't want Muhammad to be a horrible person. I'm not saying this. I'm just reading your sources, Muslims. So Muhammad was truthful, right? This is one of the proofs that he's a prophet. He never told a lie before he became a prophet, at least, according to the Muslims. Well, let's see what Muhammad says in Sahih Bukhari and a couple other.
Isn't that Da'if Bukhari? Because I keep getting told by Muslims it's Da'if. It's Da'if Bukhari.
Da'if Bukhari. Narrated Kulthum.
Kulthum.
She heard Allah's apostle saying, he who makes peace between the people by inventing good information or saying good things is not a liar. So, Lloyd, what do we call it in Christianity where someone invents information? Do we call that?
It's called being a screenwriter and working in Hollywood.
Well, okay. That's true, but
oh, you mean context? You mean context here? So not fiction. So you don't mean people who create fiction. You mean people who are telling lies. So someone who tells nice lies, sweet lies, is not lying.
So, for example, if I were to lie and say that Muhammad was the greatest man to ever live, that would not be lying according to Islam, because I'm inventing good information. If I tell a story about Muhammad that I just made up off the top of my head, let's say, do you remember the time that Muhammad found a $100 bill lying on the ground and he said, "Who here does this belong to?" And 4 people raised their hands. So he took 3 $100 bills out of his wallet and gave all 4 of them $100. Don't you remember that great story about Muhammad? Guess what? I am not a liar, because I invented good information. I invented good sayings. All those people who invented good hadith about Muhammad, they're not liars. They're good people.
Yeah, they're forwarding they're promoting Islam, and therefore what they're doing is good. And if you bring peace, notice, in order to bring peace between people, I mean, I've gone into, we've done this before, discussing the Sharia, and it states that if there's friction between people, or disputes, or arguments, or debate, and you can invent information that brings peace, that ends this dispute, then you are not a liar. So in other words, a Muslim who's trying to end an argument or a dispute or a debate by lying earns reward, because this is, according to Islam, this is the truth. This is good. So he can lie to you to end any dispute, like a theological dispute, and we have those with Muslims. But if they lie to you to end the dispute, then this is, we love Jesus too. We worship Jesus too. We follow Jesus too. That's a lie, but in Islam, that is not a lie. They define lies differently. Their moral system is inverted compared to ours. Is that what we're saying, Thaddeus?
Yes. And we'll have a couple more examples of this. So now that's just theoretical, right? That first one's just theoretical. Let's see how that works in practice, according to Muhammad, also from Da'if Bukhari, sorry. Allah's messenger said, "Who is willing to kill Ka'b bin al-Ashraf, who has hurt Allah and his apostles?" So this guy insulted Muhammad, right? Ka'b insulted Muhammad.
Yeah.
So we're split. Thereupon Muhammad, so a different Muhammad.
Muhammad bin Maslama.
Muhammad bin Maslama got up saying, "O Allah's messenger, would you like that I kill him?" So some guy insults Muhammad. Someone else stands up and says, "Would you like that I go kill this guy for insulting you?" The Prophet says, "Yes." So the other Muhammad says, "Then allow me to say a false thing to deceive Ka'b." And the Prophet says, "You may say it." So Muhammad says, or this guy insults Muhammad, and then someone wants to kill him. They said, "I can only do it if I lie to him. I can only do it if I trick him." And Muhammad says, "Go right ahead. Say whatever you need to say to get him to trust you." In the biographies, they explain this incident in more detail, and that's exactly what happens. They go to this guy, they say, "Muhammad wants to make peace with you. He wants to bring you back into the fold. Just lay down your arms and come and talk with him." And once he says, "All right," he's convinced, "All right," lets his guard down, whoosh, off with his head. Amazing. Amazing. And Muhammad right there condoning it all. Also, from Tirmidhi, "It is not lawful to lie except in 3 cases." Oh, good. It's not lawful to lie. Oh, wait. What do those 3 cases cover? Maybe we better look at that. Something the man tells his wife to please her. All right. Yeah. Okay. Maybe he just means saying nice things to your wife. "Does this dress make me look fat?" "No, honey. No, it totally doesn't." Maybe not.
Well, I mean, who's going to say, "Honey, does this dress make me look fat?" If the guy says, "Actually, that's not the dress, it's your ass," he's not going to live very long, you know?
Yeah. So maybe that's all Muhammad means. We can all see that, right? Well,
sorry, that was a bad joke, okay? So, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I mean, just so everyone knows, this is the Sharia. This is the Reliance of the Traveler, the most well-known, most common Sharia manual for lay people and scholars alike. It's actually got a chapter on lying, a chapter on permissible lying. So that in the chapter on lying, they have permissible lying, and they have obligatory lying, and then how to mislead, how to give a misleading impression, and alternatives to lying, which are still lying, but different ways of lying. They teach multiple ways of lying. Just
But
thought,
Lloyd, they've changed the definition of lying, so they're no longer lying. They call them alternatives of lying, like where you say something that you know the person will interpret one way, but you technically mean something different in your
yep,
mind. hmm Not lying anymore.
yeah. I
And
think we need to block Red Scout. So if anyone wants to go ahead and block Red Scout, please do it. He's not contributing anything to the conversation. Otherwise, I'll block him.
To be clear, the Sharia cites this exact same hadith that I'm citing here to justify obligatory lying, to justify lying to non-Muslims. And it's because there's three classes of people here, right? A man to his wife, lie during war, which really means to any non-Muslims, because they define war as their interaction with non-Muslims, because all Muslims are constantly at war with non-Muslims, at least they're supposed to be. And to lie in order to bring peace between people, that's among Muslims. So you can lie to your family, you can lie to your enemies, and you can lie to your acquaintances. Pretty much covers everything.
Yeah.
And Muhammad says, basically, the end justifies the means. If you cheated on your wife, and she'll be really mad when she finds out that you were having sex with your neighbor, just tell her you didn't, and it makes her happy. If she believes you, obviously.
Yeah.
It makes her happy that you're not cheating on her. Therefore, no lie happened. If that non-Muslim who is sowing discontent in the land, is being disobedient to Allah, if the only way you can get them to trust you is to lie, and then once they trust you to cut their head off, go right for it.
Basic. Actually, can I just show something from? I mean, just go into the Islamic sources and show a chapter on actually teaching Muslims how to lie. This is from the Ihya Ulum al Din, the revival of the religious sciences from Islam's greatest scholar after Muhammad, Ghazali, and this is in a chapter on his book, which is like one of the greatest moral and spiritual books within Islam, and it speaks of false speaking is permissible, and sometimes false speaking becomes compulsory. Okay, false speaking can be better than speaking the truth. Okay, and to compromise between two parties, false speaking is lawful. So to create a compromise when you're having an argument with a Muslim, and we're always having theological arguments, false speaking is legal. Lying is legal. The Prophet allows false speaking in 3 cases, right? To bring a compromise between two parties, and he who settles disputes between two parties is not a liar. Now, do we dispute with people like Safraz? Of course we do. And the lie which he speaks in war is not recorded, as war is a strategy. And the lie which is spoken to settle the matters between two contending parties is not written. Allah doesn't remember it. The lie which is spoken to settle the matters is not written. They repeat that. And it goes on, there is no sin in that falsehood which benefits a Muslim or removes a harm from him. And to disclose, for a Muslim, to disclose an obscene act in the community is also an obscene act. So if you see something bad happening, done by a Muslim, don't talk about it, hide it, make it a secret. So every man should save his life, property, and his honor by taking recourse to falsehood, right? And I should note here that my favorite character in the Reformation is Muhammad Luther. He actually had similar doctrines to this, oddly enough. He had certain ideas around this that just are very strange and seem to be derived from Islam. But Thaddeus, anything you've gained from this so far? I mean, this is blatantly teaching Muslims to lie. For instance, if harm is caused more than benefit in the case of speaking the truth, then avoid speaking the truth. In other words, lie. Your thoughts on this, just because this confirms from the Islamic sources, yeah?
Right. I think that they are looking at these sources, then the supposed sayings of Muhammad. They're looking at the supposed biography of Muhammad, and then they're teaching to follow his example, to do the same things that Muhammad did. I think that the Sharia straight follows from the hadith that we just looked at, that Muhammad says to trick someone into being killed for doing the horrific thing of insulting Muhammad. Muslims can do the same thing. Yeah. Muhammad says to lie in certain circumstances if it brings about peace. Other Muslims follow the example, do the same thing.
Yeah, and they claim to be the religion of truth.
And then that last point there is what this fourth hadith on the screen covers. Whoever covers a Muslim, Allah will cover him in his world, in this world, and in the hereafter.
Yeah.
Translator has added the sin of, which makes sense, because unless you're thinking that this is about clothing, that's obviously what it means in context, that if you cover up the sin of a Muslim, you cover up that disgraceful act that you observed in public. You saw that guy grab a woman and pull her into his house, and you think he's probably raping her. You cover up that sin. You cover that up. And Allah's going to do the same. Allah is going to cover up your sin.
Yes.
He's going to pretend that your vile acts didn't happen because you ignored the vile acts of someone else. Yeah, absolute depravity.
Yeah, exactly. And these are the Muslim sources. I mean, so these verses and these hadiths have been, they went into the tafsirs, they went into discussions by the Muslim scholars, and eventually they became law, and they've now become part of the Sharia. This is permanent. There's a whole chapter on that. I mean, I only went through a couple of pages, but this is an entire chapter teaching Muslims how to lie.
Yep. And to my mind, this last statement is even worse than the others that teach lying, because it's teaching you to intentionally ignore someone's vile acts so that your own vile acts will be ignored by your God. What kind of God is ignoring your sin because you ignored other people's sin? Shouldn't a God who is just and loving want people to stop sin, put an end to it? But instead, he encourages it by telling you to ignore it when you see someone else sinning.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a completely different morality. And people need to understand that. This is not the same religion. We don't worship the same God. I mean, this is... someone asked me, what is this direct source info? So let me just briefly show them, Thaddeus, then you can go on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are two sources. You can go get more detail than what I covered here. Okay, this one is the Reliance of the Traveler, the classic manner of Islamic law. So it's the Reliance of the Traveler and the Tools of the Worshipper. You need to get a copy. Any of my videos, go to the description box. You'll find a link. And the second one is the Ihya Ulum al Din, Volume 2. You'll find it any of my description boxes. Go find my Google archive, and you'll see this is Ihya Ulum al Din. Just look for the word Ihya in my Google archive. Get Volume 2, and it's page 108 that you want. So, okay, thanks, Thaddeus.
Excellent.
Please. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Thank you for that. So our next item on the list is the bearer of burdens. And after talking about the dark, demented practices of Muslims ignoring sins, we'll take a fun look at this one first, and then we'll go into what it actually means in context, because I couldn't ignore the fact that the Quran in Surah 6 says the following. Say, is it other than Allah I should desire as a Lord, while he is the Lord of all things? And every soul earns not, except against itself. And no bearer of burdens will bear the burden of another. Then to your Lord is your return, and he will inform you concerning that over which you used to differ. So I just thought, this is kind of funny here, because Muhammad was, in the exact words of Khadijah, Muhammad was a bearer of other people's burdens before Islam. And then in the Quran, it says you can't bear the burden of another. Now, Muslims will usually today cite this verse as condemning Christianity, condemning substitutionary atonement. However, the supposed occasion for the revelation of the verse is actually different. Someone was lamenting, crying over their deceased relative, and Muhammad said that the deceased is tormented in his grave because of your lamentations over him. So what he was trying to say was that you're just bringing more pain into the situation. Don't mourn for the dead in such a dramatic way. But people misunderstood him, and they thought that he was saying that this individual is literally getting more torment because of you crying about it. Because of your crying, this other individual has more burden to bear. His torment in the grave is increased. His weight, the the displeasurable activities that every Muslim receives when they die, until the day of judgment, right? So from the time they die to the day of judgment, they're tormented in the grave. His torment's even worse, is what people were thinking. And then this verse comes down and it says, no, that's not what Muhammad really meant. He just, because you see, you can't bear the burden of another. So when that guy is, lamenting over his dead relative, he's just causing more pain in the situation than there needs to be. He's not actually causing that guy to have more torment. So that's the occasion of the verse. But now let's look at that was just kind of a fun look at the literal words of Khadijah. Let's look at what she actually meant. And that's that Muhammad is empathetic, that he experiences the pain of others. So on the next slide, we have here Sahih Bukhari 5825.
Da'if Bukhari.
Sorry. I
Grief.
keep misreading that. Da'if Bukhari. So Rifa'ah divorced his wife, whereupon Abdur Rahman married her. Aisha said that the lady came wearing a green veil and complained to her of her husband and showed her a green spot on her skin caused by beating. It was the habit of ladies to show support to each other. So when Allah's messenger came, Aisha said to him, I have not seen any woman suffering as much as the believing woman. Look, her skin is greener than her clothes. So there's some back and forth. And then Muhammad says, well, I'm going to figure out what's going on here. So the man who divorced this woman whose skin has turned green from beating, the man she's married to now, right? So she married someone, he divorced her, her second husband's been beating her. And so he says, by Allah, O Allah's messenger, she has told a lie. I am very strong and can satisfy her, but she is disobedient and wants to go back to Rifa'ah, her first husband. So she said that the reason he was beating her is because she complained that he's impotent, that he is unable to get it up. He can't satisfy her in bed. He says, that's not true. I can satisfy her in bed. So Allah's messenger says to her, if that's your intention, know that it's unlawful for you to remarry Rifa'ah unless Abdul Rahman has had sexual intercourse with you. So this is his sympathy for her, right? He says, he might be beating you, but you can't divorce him because as you need to have sex with him before you can remarry your former husband. Because this is one of Allah's amazing revelations, that anyone who is divorced, they can't remarry that person unless they have sex with someone else first.
Yeah, when you read that in the Sharia, it is so disgusting. It's so detailed, and you're like, this is disgusting. You have to go, oh. And the thing is, if you read the Hedaya, this adult woman can have, as long as she can find even a boy, a little boy, as long as the boy can get it up, she just has to kind of, let's just say, step on it and then step off and it's all good. But she can use literally a little boy, underage, a minor. It's legal. It's crazy. It's insane. I just want to mention there was this here where Abu Bakr, I mean, there's just this, the Prophet said, leave her as she does more than this, right? And because Aisha apparently used to really give him a hard time. And once there was an altercation between the Prophet and Aisha when they found Abu Bakr as their judge, Aisha said to the Prophet, you speak, but don't speak except the truth, because she used to accuse him of lying. And at once Hadrat Abu Bakr gave her such a slap that blood began to ooze from her mouth. So, I mean, they beat her. Even her father beat her. And Muhammad did nothing about it. I mean, where do you find Jesus slapping people that blood begins to ooze from women's mouths? It's just insane. You know? It's just really, I mean, oh, by the way, this is something that people might also really enjoy. This is also Aisha. This is a legitimate Sahih hadith from Ghazali himself. Aisha angrily said to the Messenger of Allah, it is you who pretend to be a prophet from Allah. It is you who pretend to be a prophet from Allah. And of course, Muhammad said the superiority of Aisha over other women is like the superiority of burgers over other meals. Right? So I don't want to call him or her a liar. I'll just leave that at that. That is your thoughts. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's very consistent, right? It has no sympathy for Aisha, has no sympathy for this woman who is being beat. The narrator of this hadith even feels he needs to add, it's the habit of women to support each other. How dare those women look out for another woman who's being beat by her husband? That's the only reason she even brought this up in the first place. Muhammad's perfectly justified in ignoring the fact that she's being beaten and says, go back to your former husband. To finish the story here. So Muhammad, after saying, right, you can't divorce him or you can't go back to your previous husband because you haven't had sex with this guy, he notices that Abdul Rahman has his two boys with him. And he says, are those your sons? And Abdul Rahman says, yes. And the Prophet says, you claim what you claim. So saying this to the woman, you claim that he's impotent, but by Allah, those boys resemble him as a crow resembles a crow, i.e., Muhammad, in his genius, determines because he had boys in the past, was able to get it up in the past. That means that he definitely lying about this, that he definitely is able to get it up. He definitely is able to satisfy her sexually. So she's just a liar. She deserves to be beaten. He doesn't feel any empathy for her whatsoever. Go back to your husband who's making your skin turn green so he can make your skin turn green some more. Muhammad, the bearer of burdens.
Yeah. I mean, this is crazy. Where did they get this morality? Or lack thereof?
I don't know. It's very dark looking at this. But again, this isn't me saying this. This is your own sources saying this. I did not write Daif Bukhari. Imam Bukhari recorded this hadith, passed on from a chain of narrations from good, faithful Muslims. They did not see a problem with this. They thought this was a good moral teaching, that you see this woman is lying about her husband by Muhammad's terrible logic, therefore she deserves to be beaten. And it's only because Aisha is one of those silly women who tries to support each other, one of those women deficient in religion and intelligence, that this took place in the first place.
Wow. Yeah.
All right, so I didn't want to end with all this dark, horrible stuff, so I left entertaining guests to the last. This one's more just fun. It's not that horrific in comparison to what we've seen, but even on this trivial thing, right? Even on this trivial thing where Muhammad was supposedly a great dinner host, he was supposedly really good at hosting parties before he was a prophet. Even on this thing, Allah explicitly tells him to stop doing that. From the Quran, Surah 33, verse 53, O you who have believed, do not enter the houses of the prophet, houses plural, by the way, except when you are permitted for a meal, without awaiting its readiness. But when you are invited, then enter, and when you have eaten, disperse, without seeking to remain for conversation. Indeed, that was troubling the prophet, and he is shy of you. But Allah is not shy of the truth. And when you ask for something, ask them from behind a partition. That is pure for your hearts and their hearts. And it is not for you to harm the messenger of Allah or to marry his wives after him ever. Indeed, that would be in the sight of Allah an enormity. So if you go to Muhammad's house as a dinner guest, and you really like Muhammad, and you want to stay there all night talking to him because you're having a good time, don't do it. Leave his house immediately. He has women to get to. He has many sexual activities to commit to tonight. He has no time for you being a friend to him. You need to leave that house right away, because if you stay, that is a grievous offense in the sight of Allah. That's one of the worst things you can do, is overstaying your welcome at Muhammad's house. Or, after he dies, remarrying his widows. They must remain widows forever because Muhammad is the only man that's allowed to touch these women. They're his women. They belong to him. Do not interfere in this matter. So Allah takes the good host Muhammad, who's too shy to tell you that you're annoying him, and says, stop doing that. Muhammad's a busy man. Get the heck out of there as soon as you're done eating.
And he's just so weird.
And keep in mind, this is the eternal word of Allah, written from before the foundation of the universe. Has this all-important verse to not overstay your welcome.
I just want to show something on that. This is just so weird, right? This is Aisha. This is in the Sirah. Since we're discussing, this is from a very famous Sirah. This is the Ashifa al-Qadi Iyad, the messenger of Allah, Muhammad, right? From Qadi Iyad ibn Musa, blah, blah, blah. Aisha said, I never, ever saw the private parts of the messenger of Allah. You're like, what? I never saw the private parts of it. What? It's like, okay. And then Ali said, the Prophet asked me to make sure no one except me, his son Ali, his adopted son, washed him, because Muhammad said to Ali, no one has seen me naked without going blind. I mean, so yeah, these women, well, this is why his wives had to wear this, to save themselves from going blind. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
It is consistent with some of the things we read in Muhammad's biography, where, he, or in the Quran for that matter, where Muhammad is the light, right? He's the light of the world. And when he's born, correct me if I'm wrong, but the bat signal goes out from his mother's body, let's say, goes hundreds of miles away, and people can see it from far, far away because the Bible says that Jesus is the light of the world, and Muslims thought that meant that a prophet was a literal light. So when Muhammad's born, his light shines forth on the world, because he's naked, right? He's born naked. He doesn't have any clothes covering it up. Shines forth on the world. People can see it for hundreds of miles. Yeah. If they look at it directly, too close by, they're going to be blinded. So he's got to wear clothes at all times. You can never see his body. And when people were making fun of him, saying that he had a deformity, Allah sends a revelation about how people used to do the same about Moses. They used to say that he had a deformity. So you know what Allah does, the creator of the universe, to protect Moses from being insulted? He makes a rock steal his clothing and run away. So then Moses chases after that rock, and people see him naked and say, oh, he doesn't have a deformity after all.
Yeah.
And then of course, he beats the rock and leaves a mark and blah, blah, blah. Muhammad, he didn't have any rock stealing his clothing. He just said, if you see me naked, you'll go blind. So that's why I'm always wearing clothes. So stop making fun of me for being deformed.
Yeah. And someone mentioned, don't forget to let Muhammad lick your fingers clean when you're having the food. It's just let Muhammad lick your fingers. He likes that. Ooh, man, just thinking about it hurts my brain. Oh my gosh.
There's a blessing hidden in your food, and you don't know if it's in the part of the food that you ate or the part that's stuck on your fingers. So you better lick those fingers. And hey, if you don't, Muhammad's going to.
I mean, seriously, if another man had to try to lick my fingers, the guy wouldn't. He'd need to see an orthodontist shortly after. You know what I'm saying?
Muhammad liked to suck on things. I've noticed.
Oh man, just the brain stabbing images I don't need. This is too traumatic.
I'll leave that to your imagination about what that might mean about his sexuality. I'm just saying, Muhammad likes to suck on things. All right. Now it's time for our little infomercial. I'm sure you're all very ready to take your Shahada. You want to call now and get this great deal on the Shahada. But wait, there's more. That's not all you get when you take the Shahada. There's more stuff that you don't know about Muhammad. all of these things taken from the life of Muhammad, most found in other sources as well. Muhammad used to call people brothers of monkeys. Very kind guy. He had rabbis dragged around by their hair. They wouldn't convert to Islam, so he said, grab them by the hair and pull them around. He was said to love perfume and women and food above all else.
Actually, on that point, if
What
I
does
can
that sound
show
like to you?
something here, in fact, in Tabari, it confirms that Muhammad was a womanizer. And it says here, I'm the daughter of one who competes with the wind. I'm Layla bin Khatam. I've come to offer myself in marriage to you, so marry me. He replied, I accept. She went back to her people and said that the messenger of Allah had married her. They said, what a bad thing you have done. You are a self-respecting woman, but the Prophet is a womanizer. Seek an annulment from him. She went back to the Prophet and asked him to revoke the marriage, and he complied. The Prophet is a womanizer. History of Al-Tabari, Volume 9, page 139, if anyone's interested. So, yeah,
Accurate.
this is in the Muslim sources. I know, the most dangerous book in the New Testament, as we know, the one that everyone uses against us, that atheists, the most violent book in the New Testament is the book of Acts. Okay? And I mean, this is very sad. It's an unfortunate one. Atheists use it against us all the time. That we go around, it's the book, whatever. But does anywhere in the Gospels does it talk about Jesus being called a womanizer? It's just the contrast. It's just like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, I don't remember when the disciples were writing the New Testament. I don't remember any of them passing on stories about how Jesus used to love women, perfume, and food above all else.
Being a worldly person, not a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
This would be someone who's into themselves, a narcissist, maybe.
Yeah, narcissist, that works. Hedonist, another term.
Yeah.
Glutton, good one. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't think this is a description of a prophet. This sounds like the typical rich boy who is disconnected from reality and only cares of society. Old man, physically frail, can barely do anything as far as physical activity goes. A slave girl, the lowest status of society. Even they get executed for making fun of Muhammad. Of course, well known, Muhammad ordered the execution of all apostates for all of time. Anyone who leaves Islam, kill him. Great stuff, great stuff. Clearly what a true prophet would say. Of course, we can't leave out poor Zayd, who Muhammad saw his wife, who was apparently very beautiful, scantily clad. Allah sends a wind to reveal her even more. And then Muhammad's heart leaps and he desires her. But Zayd, he wants to be a good son or adopted son. So he says, oh, it's okay, Muhammad. I don't mind. You can have my wife. I'll divorce her. And then Muhammad's like, oh, man, this is too disgusting even for me. Keep your wife. Just keep her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said anything. But then Allah says, Muhammad, what are you doing? You have to marry her. I picked that wind that made you see her attractive body. Don't you see? Here you are saying, keep your wife. Well, you can't do that. Everyone needs to know that they are allowed to marry the divorced son, or the divorced wives of their son-in-laws.
Yeah, that goes straight against the Jewish law. And under the Jewish law, he would be killed. This would be a crime. So he violates the law. And I mean, he completely violates the Ten Commandments, and he goes and violates the Jewish law, and he claims to be the fulfillment of it.
And then, of course, when people kept complaining, saying, this is disgusting, Muhammad, how can you be a prophet and do something like this? Even we, dirty, disgusting pagans, know that it's wrong to marry your son's wife, even if he's your adopted son. It's still basically the same thing. You disgusting pervert. Then Allah sends down, he was never Muhammad's son anyway, because adoption has been abolished. Just call him by his original name. You see, it was just some random guy. It wasn't Muhammad's son at all. It was just some random guy who divorced his wife, and then Muhammad married her. Of course, Muhammad also tortured a man for money. Let's not forget about that. Didn't torture him for, leaving Islam or blaspheming Allah or even blaspheming Muhammad, just because he wanted his money. He knew where the treasure was hidden. Muhammad wanted it. Guy wouldn't tell him. Time to torture him. Muhammad also, in such beautiful, elegant words that will make anyone convert to Islam when they hear them, he expressed his desire for vengeance. We will mutilate them as no Arab has ever mutilated anyone before. We are the best of all mutilators. Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, just to wrap it all up, although I didn't actually cover everything disgusting Muhammad did, he personally, not had his armies, he personally took a sword and beheaded 900 Jews in one night, which was, of course, backed by Allah's declaration that non-Muslims, Jews and Christians in particular, are the worst of all creatures. So you see, he wasn't murdering 900 Jews. So before I reveal my conclusion, Lloyd, I'm sure that you want to take a shahada. I'm sure that you want to convert to Islam right here and right now.
To say the shanana?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. No, after all of this, I'm sorry, but this is filthy. Yeah, we're getting network drops. I do apologize. We're getting network drops. I'm seeing this, but I restarted my computer. I restarted my router today, and I'm showing 0 drop frames from my side. So it looks like this is a network problem from YouTube, because everything is looking really healthy on my end. My software, is showing really good. Everything's good here. So yeah, I'm sorry about that, but it seems that YouTube may be acting up, because I'm not showing any errors on this end, which is so strange. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, back to you, Thaddeus. Yeah.
Yeah, or you call it shanana. I like that. I like to call it the shahada.
Yeah.
It's funny, and that anyone would ever convert to Islam. But if you want to go to the last slide, let's just sum this all up, because we've looked at a lot of depravity. It's easy to kind of lose sight of it all. So again, here are the traits, according to Islamic sources, of Muhammad before he becomes a prophet. He's the keeper of good social relations. He's an honest and skilled tradesman. He's a faithful husband to one wife. He's trustworthy, i.e., he's someone that you can look up to or you can place your trust in. He helps the poor, that is, he's generous. He's truthful. He doesn't tell any lies. He's the bearer of burdens, that is, he's empathetic for other people. Mm-hmm. And he even is a great host. He entertains his guests. In total, he's an upstanding member of society of good character. Now, if you'll advance it here, we'll see the after. After Muhammad claims that he's a prophet and receives revelation from God, he becomes a disruptor of social order. Never have we before seen a man who brought so much strife in our society, according to his contemporaries. He's no longer a skilled and honest tradesman. Instead, he takes the easy route and he just steals their stuff. Why trade for double your money when you could just take it all by attacking their caravan? He's no longer the faithful husband of one wife. He now has numerous wives, and he can't even be faithful to his numerous wives. He cheats on them with slave girls, and then Allah justifies him. He's no longer trustworthy. He instead breaks his oath under the direct command of Allah. He no longer helps the poor and unfortunate. Instead, he's the oppressor who's taking all the money and maybe distributing some of it after he's had his share. He used to be truthful. Now he's a liar. He says you can lie in any way that benefits Islam, that benefits the spread of my new political domination. Can't even really call it a religion. He no longer is empathetic for other people. Instead, he's ruthless. He doesn't care about what others think about him or anything else. He just wants what he wants. That's all there is to it. And finally, even his status as a good host is taken away. He just wants people to leave him alone so he can do what he wants to do at night. He's no longer an upstanding member of society and good character. He's a horrific person, one of the worst people to ever live, not according to me, according to Islam sources. Did he actually do all these things? I don't know. But if Islam's true, then he did. If your sources are true, then this is who Muhammad is.
Why is this in their official sources?
Right.
Wow, voters, thank you very much. So grateful. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate the contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry. I'm watching like large screens. I've actually, so my one screen is quite far away. So I'm not always looking at the camera because my screens are. But thank you. And I've got to look at the chat on this side, and then sometimes, so. Yeah, Thaddeus, I mean, this is, Jesus, for 2,000 years, Jesus was considered the greatest moral example for mankind. And then after the Enlightenment, a movement started to try to dethrone Jesus from that position, to make him into something that he is not, so that they could replace him with the image of man, right? Which is the atheist prerogative and the socialist prerogative. They're the same thing at the end of the day. And then we had Hitler come along, and Hitler was considered of major impact to the world and to Western society, because Hitler now became the worst moral example to mankind. But the sad thing is that people that have been claiming that, well, religions are all the same, religions only teach good things, and you get groups that actually believe this. And that I had one guy on my channel recently that they're called, I think they're called monists. I'm not sure. It's something like monist, but they believe that all religions come from one source and they all teach the same timeless truths and they all have the same moral underpinnings, which is absolutely not true, because some religions are evil. And Muhammad needs to be considered in the light of this, and we need to consider him as an example of the moral decline, the moral depravity that we need to avoid, on the same plane as someone like Hitler. I mean, we do need to see him as an opposite of Jesus, not as someone. I mean, they're not Abrahamic. That's a false claim. So, your thoughts on that, Thaddeus?
Yeah, if you advance it one more time, we asked the question: was Muhammad bearing good fruit or bearing bad fruit? This is the kind of fruit that I picture Muhammad as: a rotten, disgusting thing that belongs in the trash. This is the visual picture of who Muhammad is, the type of fruit that he bears. Jesus is the good shepherd. Jesus is the source of truth. Jesus is the light of the world. Muhammad is the counterfeit. Muhammad is the man who was correct. He was attacked by a demon in a cave, and unfortunately, he was convinced by his relatives to take that demon and make that demon his god. And this is the result of it. The horrible tree that is the demon that Muhammad was attacked by is bearing the disgusting fruit of Islam through Muhammad.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. The group is called Omnists. They're called Omnists. This is exactly it. Yeah, we're still getting occasional network dropouts, but OBS is showing 100%. YouTube is showing 100%. This is very strange. Yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's the transmission from you to me has been perfect the whole time. Obviously, I don't know when I was talking, but
yeah, we've had a perfect transmission, so
it's been perfect. So I think it's got to be on YouTube's end.
Yeah, because I'm seeing zero issues on my end. Quite honestly, it's showing perfect. Everything's green. Yeah. So yeah, that good grief. Yeah, I mean, it makes me ill to think about this. It makes me ill to go into these things. It's so I think, yes, Horst, it's like omnis in Latin. I think it's like that. I can't be sure. Yeah. So any final comment? Because I'll just yeah. I mean, this is horrible. I mean, this is horrific. This is written in his official sources. You've got Jesus as someone who did not commit sin, even within the Islamic sources, and you've got Muhammad, who, according to any logical standard, was incredibly sinful, violent, and depraved.
And again, I I don't even have to pass judgment on this, right? I don't even have to say it's wrong to be a caravan robber. All I have to look at is the comparison of who Muhammad was before and who he was after. And in every case, every single character trait that is ascribed by Islamic sources to Muhammad from before the time he was a prophet and is seen as a positive character trait, it's contradicted by his prophethood. It's turned on its head. Everything's turned upside down, according to, not me, Islam's sources. They say he was a great man, and then he became this other thing. And you can say, well, if Allah says that Muhammad's allowed to have 9 wives, then he's allowed to have 9 wives. That's missing the point.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, he
making him
potentially had as
worse.
many as 22 wives over his career because he divorced people and remarried. So he may have had as many as 22 wives. Right. And
Well,
then,
to be
yeah,
clear, any Muslim can have 22 wives, right? But they can only have 4 at one time.
right.
And Muhammad had more than 4 at one time in
Yeah.
violation of the Quran.
Yeah. While I'm at this, I just want to bring people's attention to something that I'm busy with. Muhammad did what he willed. Okay, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, right? But Muhammad did as his will allowed, right? He did what he wanted, and this is part of Aleister Crowley, of his beliefs as well. I mean, he was a Satanist, Freemason, all of the above. Created his own religion called Thelema, and I have this that I'm working on at the moment. But are you familiar with Aleister Crowley? That is?
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, not me much either, but I'm digging into this. But let's just say that he might have found just a tiny little bit of inspiration from Islam, just the tiniest amount. You will find out that Crowley, let's just say, rejects the Bible, rejects the Gospels, rejects Jesus, redefines Jesus. And he found a great deal, shall we say, to like, to praise, and to incorporate from Islam, which is kind of weird, you know, considering Islam is so holy. But let's just say there's a little bit of a connection here that I have not found on any of these channels that discuss Crowley. They'll mention he went to Egypt, and they leave it at that. And I find it really convenient that so many of these channels somehow don't dig into the actual fact of his detailed connections to Islam, to Sufism, and Islamic magic. A lot of people have been asking me to talk about Islamic magic. Well, when you start talking about Islamic magic and Islamic occult, Islamic rituals, and the Sufis, then we're going to have to talk about this guy. Any thought there, Thaddeus, before I go on?
Yeah, I would just say, it ties into what we saw at the beginning of this when we kind of wasn't directly on subject, but I wanted to really emphasize how Muhammad's prophethood began. What we see is hints that he was practicing magic. He was practicing mysticism. He was intentionally trying to tap into the spiritual world. And when you do that, you open yourself up to receiving not what you desired, but a demon instead. And that's exactly what I think happened with Muhammad. And I think that these magical elements are retained, that they are, whitewashed out officially, but they're retained. They're retained in the Gnostic secret elements of Islam. And ultimately, a lot of Islam is the practice of traditional pagan magic. It's just not talked about.
Yeah, we're getting really, so Marion's saying the sound is cutting out so bad I can't understand what you're saying. So apparently we're getting some serious, the jinns are attacking us right now.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I'm hearing you perfectly, and presumably you're hearing me perfectly, so I don't get it. But
And then the last thing I want to end with, maybe from my side, you saw this earlier, Thaddeus, right? This is on my community tab. Go have a look. But this is very, very interesting. Suleiman the Magnificent, let's just say he funded Protestantism. And then you may not have heard of something called with Calvinism, known as Calvino-Turkism, became the dominant religion. And let's just say that's a very deep, dark, weird rabbit hole. Let's just say that the words religious tolerance don't mean what you think it means. Let's let's just say there's a lot more going on there than yeah. The words they don't use the words the way we use the words. So there's some weirdness there that I'll be tackling as well in the future. Just there's so many things I've got on the go right now. Yeah. So that's
Looks like some people
Yeah,
said the
sorry?
sound's fine. So I think if you're one of the people who are having problems with the sound, I think if you watch the recording back, it'll probably be fine. I think it's probably not on the incoming to YouTube, but it's on the going back out, and it's only affecting some people. So if you watch back the replay will probably be perfect. There probably won't be any issues with it.
Yeah, but I've had this before where certain people would be targeted by YouTube, it seems, and they would have problems for like 12 hours after the show, and they just. So yeah, I've had this before. YouTube just giving me grief, or certain people. The guys are saying it's okay now. So yeah, guys, Islam. You see, Islam produces rotten fruit, and we're gonna find that Islam has deep ties to Gnosticism. Islam has deep ties into the occult. Islam has deep ties into well-known Satanists. Islam has deep ties into, as we saw, Crowley. We'll probably find Anton LaVey mixed in there somewhere if I go take a look. I'm reasonably sure I'd find something. You're going to find occult magic. And also, I mean, you've got to look at the inspirations. If you go into the... Now, what I showed there with the connection with the Ottoman Empire and Europe, right? This is not... This is far more... Let's just say the way the historians are describing it and the way I'm discovering it are two very different things. Academia is complicit in lying to you. I'll say that bluntly. And there's a lot more going on here than they are discussing within the history books. And also, this is the Ottoman Empire, and the export of their ideas was part of what was this revival of the occult in Europe. They were part and parcel of this occult revival in Europe. And also the people in the Enlightenment, the major figures that people respect from the Enlightenment, they go, oh, these Enlightenment thinkers, they introduce rationality and that primitive pagan superstition of Christianity. You know, they toss that aside like the trash it is, and they introduce rationality and logic. These very same Enlightenment figures, when you put them on a list and then you go through another list that says, who were the people involved deeply into the occult, into the Rosicrucians, into the Freemasons, into Gnostic, Hermetic, and Satanic groups and cults and ideas, well, it's the same people, right? The same list. So atheists, yeah, let's just say that their little story, their narrative is going to fall apart as well. Atheists do not have a leg to stand on. They are just lying to themselves. And that's something that I plan to do a lot of work on as well, because, yeah, Satanism and atheism, let's just say the two are not as unrelated as one might think. So, yeah, your thoughts on that, Thaddeus?
Yeah, it sounds like some very interesting topics coming up. From experience, I know you always bring lots of interesting research, find lots of things that people aren't talking about. Some cases, things that people have simply forgotten from earlier research done a century ago, but in many cases, things that are well known in academia today and just are not filtering down to the public. So I definitely am looking very forward to hearing those.
Yeah, no, I say very blunt things, but let's just say what I'm finding, it upsets me. I talk about the things that anger me, that upset me, that frustrate me. And yeah, all of these things are simply just anti-Christian. They all seem to have one intent, and they all seem to be quite bluntly satanic. They are all in opposition to Christianity. And we do need to expose this. We do need to show people that there's not only the standard Islamic narrative, which is false, there is the standard academic narrative, which is equally false. Now, I don't want to paint every scholar with the same brush, but let's just say a lot of scholars are guilty of the standard academic narrative. For whatever reason, there's the standard academic narrative, which is, let's just say, edited. Your thoughts on that, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to ascribe like people doing it out of fraud per se. Like they're not necessarily doing it to deceive the public, or rather they want to keep this information private for their own safety, for their, just because they're private people, they don't want to public speak. I mean, most people who are in academia, they don't want to be famous, they don't want to be a speaker, and they certainly don't want to have their heads chopped off by an angry Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
I think that perhaps, as people like you and I and many other people doing this work are exposing some of their material to the public, and they're seeing that there is no backlash, I think maybe their attitudes will change a little bit, and that they will be a little bit more open about being upfront about these things and not trying to keep them behind closed doors of the university.
Yeah, Sasa says he sent you something to show Thaddeus. Except Thaddeus says we have a problem at the moment. Thaddeus can't share his screen because of an issue on my end. And so I would have to share it.
Yeah, and I think he just meant in general. I don't think he meant just now.
Okay.
Because I didn't get anything just now via Skype anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm about a week behind on email, so I probably just haven't seen your email yet, if that's...
Yeah,
that's
but look, the next time an atheist tells you about the Enlightenment, say, oh, you mean the Satanist movement? Or would you say, oh, the occult movement? Or, oh, the Hermetics, the Gnostics, the Madame Blavatskys of the day? So just sort of take it from that stance. It's in fact, it's modern paganism. It's really just modern paganism mixed in with occult magic. Okay, so yeah, that's it from me. And I mean, Thaddeus, this has been, it makes me feel ill just listening to this stuff and how people can regard this as moral and right and holy.
Yeah, and I will say that I don't want to say all Muslims support this. Many of them are simply ignorant. They believe the lies that the more knowledgeable Muslims tell us, that Muhammad's a great man, blah blah blah.
Yeah, your video is frozen. Oh, great.
Well, as long as you can still hear me,
we can hear you fine.
Okay. So there are many Muslims who just common everyday Muslims who go to the mosque, and if they knew this material, they would probably leave Islam. And indeed, that's why many people are leaving Islam, is because they're being exposed to this material. I encourage people to take this material and use it to have friendly conversations with Muslims in your own life, or they don't have to be friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Acquaintances, coworkers, the guy who runs the Halal grocery store down the street, whatever. Take it to people who you have a real life connection to, and bring it up. See what they have to say about it, because most Muslims are there are some, right? There are some ISIS jihadis or wannabe ISIS jihadis, but most are better than their God. Most are better than their prophet. And if they knew what Islam really stood for, as opposed to the lies and half-truths that they've heard, they wouldn't want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Faris says, friendly conversations made me lose my teeth, not kidding. Yeah, I mean, in different cultures, this will get you hurt. But in the West, let's have those friendly conversations if we can, before we are also faced with overt violence. Sorry, Faris, that had to happen to you, but yeah, we need to talk about this. These are their sources, and let's just be fearless. Let's do this, because we have a better alternative. We have a better example to follow, and I have no intention of submitting to someone who, as far as I'm concerned, is a Satanist, or someone as depraved and evil as Muhammad. So that's it from me. That is, yeah, your video has dropped out completely.
Yeah, I restarted the camera. Hopefully.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're back. Okay, so your camera dropped out.
Yeah,
okay,
it takes
you're
a
back.
second for it to unfreeze, but yep. I'll be back in a little under 2 hours on the Reason to Worship channel with my weekly Bible study. Do it every Friday night. And tomorrow I will be on Your Brother in Christ open call-in show. Anyone can bring any question they want. I think that's it for me, and I look forward to working with Lloyd again in the future. I would like to also thank everyone who gave super chats. I really appreciate you supporting Lloyd, helping him do this really important work, because I think he is one of the best, if not the best, researcher we have. He brings tons of material that no one else is talking about, and he's moving the narrative. He's moving it away from where Muslims are comfortable with this Quran says, no, it doesn't say, game that they play, and the age of Aisha. Those are arguments that they're comfortable with. Those are arguments that they have their answer. Whether that answer actually works, well, no, it doesn't. But they have an answer. They know what to say in response, and it prevents their brain from clicking on. When you bring this new material that no one's ever heard before, gets through sometimes, and suddenly something clicks, and they begin to see, wait a minute, if I didn't know that, what else am I being lied to about? Are those explanations that have been given for these horrific things actually work, or are they just covering it up?
Yeah, they need to be questioned. And yeah, these things, we can't play their game. We definitely cannot play their game. And Islam is at the bottom of a lot of dark, pernicious, poisonous, depraved things in the world. And it's worse than you realize. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Thaddeus. This has been really, it drains me and it makes me tired to listen to this. It's painful, to understand that Muslims think this is good.
Yeah, definitely. After doing one of these talks, I always, like, while I'm doing it, I have adrenaline flowing, and I can kind of push it out of my mind. But when I stop and I think about what I just said, it's like, man, this is why I have to do this. It's unpleasant. It's not something I want to do, but this is why I have to do this, because this religion isn't just wrong. It is evil.
Yes.
It is horrific. It is from Satan.
Yeah. Farish says Epstein should have been a Muslim. Have you seen the picture of that temple on his island? It looks a little bit like an Egyptian temple in the painting, but it's got a dome on it, a cupola, which looks very Islamic. So yeah, so that's it from us, guys. So I will be on, I believe, tomorrow night with Mal from Reason Dawn. Mal from Reason Dawn says, "Oh my gosh, Mal from Islamic Origins." Yeah, so I'll be on hopefully at an off-the-cuff stream with Mal tomorrow. I don't think it's anything that's particularly planned. And next Thursday with Chris at Speaker's Corner, and then you and I can plan for something again in the near future. That is
excellent.
Yeah, I mean, this is disturbing just to hear this again. You're like, this offends me. This is immoral. It offends my sense of right. It's like, no, we cannot have this in the world. Yeah.
Agreed.
Look, guys, this is all. We don't own the newspapers like Rupert Murdoch, and we can't put this on Fox News. Just talk to your friends. Talk about it. Just speak about it. Just don't be silent. That's all. Talk about
it. Indeed, the world is changed one person at a time, and then the church exploded on the most powerful empire the world has ever known, the Roman Empire. One conversation at a time, one conversion at a time.
Yeah. I mean, Thaddeus' channel was one subscriber once upon a time. Prof. Yaffle, thank you very much. My channel was one sub and I was on the fringes. Times change. So your voice is very powerful, so to speak.
Yep. One person at a time. If you change one person's life for eternity, think how great that is.
Yeah, so thank you, guys. Yeah, so that should end it. But thank you very much, Thaddeus. And thank you, everyone, for your time, for the audience. I hope you've learned something. And yeah, we'll see you guys again soon. All right. God bless.